In chapter 46, Pip goes to visit Magwitch. He's staying on Mill Pond Bank in the house where Clara, Herbert's fiance, lives. And Clara is the caregiver of a very sick father. Old Bill Barley is how we'll refer to him. And she has a little bit of help from a woman named Mrs. Wimple. So when Pip arrives on page 397, Herbert's already there. Herbert makes frequent visits to his fiance. And as soon as Pip walks in, he hears this loud roaring noise from above. And that is, quote, Gruffingrim, the truculent ogre who is Clara's father. He is an alcoholic. He drinks rum all the time. And the reason is because he has gout, a really painful disorder in your joints. And so he drinks to try and mask the pain. He used to be someone who would ride on ships and help serve the food on ships. But now he's considered an invalid. He's locked away in his room, kind of like maybe Mrs. Joe was at the end of her life. Um, these end of life painful experiences are portrayed by some characters. We never actually meet Old Bill Barley, but we do hear him as Pip walks by his room and how he just mutters to himself on page 400. He says, "Ahoy, bless your eyes, here's Old Bill Barley. Here's Old Bill Barley, bless your eyes. Here's Old Bill Barley on the flat of his back by the Lord, lying on the flat of his back like a drifting old dead flounder." So he's quite a strange character, and Clara cannot marry Herbert until Old Bill passes, which is kind of sad. So they're in a waiting mode right now, but she's doing a very tender job taking care of him. In a lot of ways, he's portrayed as the big bad wolf, and she is Little Red Riding Hood as she comes in with her basket filled with food to take to him, and how sweet Herbert tenderly relieves her of the basket. She was a charming girl, might have passed for a captive fairy, and there was something so natural and winning in her way. And so, unfortunately, Pip is bearing witness to a really sweet, wonderful relationship after he just had his heart ripped out by Estella. So, that's just one of those things that happens. That's life. You know, as soon as you have a heartbreak, you're going to encounter beautiful couples all around you just to make you feel worse. But anyway, they walk on in to where Magwitch is staying, and Magwitch is so great and happy. He's not upset about any of this. He says, "Ah, dear boy, Jaggers knows, and then I've talked with Wemmick," says Pip, "and I've come to tell you what caution he gave me and what advice." And so Pip goes ahead and tells Magwitch everything, and how when the time comes, they're going to put him on a boat and try and get him to safety. And he's very reasonable. He's not upset. He's not scared. If he gets caught, if he dies, he's okay because he got to see his boy. And now Magwitch is going to take on yet another name. So remember, his real name, Abel Magwitch. The name he is sort of faking when interacting with Jaggers and as Pip's uncle, Uncle Provis. The pseudonym that Wemmick gave him was Tom Jagger Richard. And the name he's going to have while he's staying at Clara's house is Mr. Campbell. So he's a man of many names, having to be under many different disguises. But remember when he first arrived and confessed to Pip that he was the benefactor in chapter 39, Pip was still like, oh, he didn't want to touch him. He was disappointed that his money was coming from this low source. But now Pip is coming around to appreciating him. And so as soon as Pip gets to leave, he says, "Well, I don't like you to leave you here, although I can't doubt that you're safer here than near me. Goodbye." And Magwitch says, "Dear boy, I don't know when we'll meet again, but I don't like goodbye. Say good night." And Pip says, "Good night. Herbert will regularly go between us, and when the time comes, I will be ready. Good night. Good night." So they are coming around to a mutual friendship, and that's good, especially for Pip's redemption. Um, as Pip leaves and begins his progress of rowing up and down the Thames River to check on Magwitch, Magwitch flips the blinds to indicate that he's okay. And Pip still has this feeling that he's being watched and followed. And so we always know there's Orlick out there, and now we know there's Compassin out there. So, and wherever there's a lot of money, there are going to be criminals trying to get their hands on it. So it gets a little creepy in chapters 47 and 48. Weeks go by. I think we're in about February, and Pip tells us of two things that are really important. First of all, Pip hasn't been taking money for a while, and so he's starting to feel the need for money, and he has to sell some of his jewelry just to get some cash. So that's one thing we're seeing Pip start to suffer with. He's no longer taking money from the convict. And also, he avoids newspapers because he doesn't want to see the wedding announcement of Estella and Drummel. But he's trying to patiently wait, and one afternoon in the late month of February, Mr. Wopsle has a play. And it's funny how throughout the whole time, Wopsle's staring in Pip's direction, which an actor is supposed to, that's why they call that the fourth wall. An actor is not supposed to do that. But on page 408, Pip says, how do you do? I saw that you noticed me. And Wopsle says, sure, but I saw someone behind you. Do you remember that time on Christmas Day when we went to go chase the two convicts and Gargery had to have his handcuffs mended? And Pip's like, yes, I do remember. He's like, and do you remember how I ran ahead and you guys kept up as well as you could? And Pip's like, he says, sure, but that's not how it went. Well, I swear that the person sitting behind you was one of those two prisoners, the one who had been mauled. I swear I saw him, and the more I think of it, the more certain I am of him. This was a really long time ago, and what are the odds that an actor on stage would look back into the darkness of a theater and make that connection from years and years ago? But so Deus Ex Machina for sure. But regardless, it's spooky. And the thing that we need to know about Compasson is that he wears black prosperous clothes. Compasson's on the loose, and he was sitting behind Pip at Wopsle's play. The next event that Pip tells us about is in chapter 48, and he has dinner with Jaggers. Jaggers has washed his hands of Pip, and yet a large hand grabs him on the shoulder and invites him over. But Wemmick is, remember, he's work Wemmick when he sits around with Jaggers, and so he's posting fish in his post office mouth. You know, he's very stiff and uncomfortable. The thing is, all those moments of deja vu that Pip had before, when he first met Molly, when he then saw Estella again for the second time, now he sees Molly again and it clicks. He has the epiphany. On page 415, as Molly is serving the food, I looked at those eyes and flowing hair, and I compared them with other hands, other eyes, other hair, and what might be after 20 years of a brutal husband and a stormy life. Jaggers earlier in the chapter intimated that Estella is likely to be abused in her relationship with Drummel. And Pip is infuriated by the thought that not only has Estella settled for this brute, but that he might hurt her. Then he sees Molly. And remember, Molly has these scars on her wrists. And so now he's connecting. Molly is Estella's mother. And so Pip asks some questions after dinner. And remember, Wemmick is referred to as the twins. So he asks home twin Wemmick the questions. Yes, Molly was a former criminal. Molly had Jaggers as her lawyer, and she is a murderer. She throttled a woman out of jealousy, and this woman was much bigger than she, but this woman threatened to come between Molly and her husband, quote, over the broomstick, so not an actual formal marriage. The woman clawed at Molly's wrists, trying to break free while Molly is strangling her, and that's why Jaggers says that Molly has the strongest hands. Jaggers, being an amazing defense attorney, was able to get her acquitted. They dressed her in a slight shirt to make her look more petite before the jury. And then they were also wondering, well, what about her little girl? So at the time, Estella would have been about 2, and the little girl disappeared. And so the jury was wondering if she had also killed her daughter. Well, Molly was not on trial for the murder of her daughter. And so the scratches could have been the scratches of a little child's fingernails. The scratches could have been shards from being in the woods, being torn up by weeds. And so since they couldn't figure out what happened, you couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Molly was the murderer. And so she won. Now, even though she was let off, she ended up returning to Jaggers, and she has been serving her sentence as his housekeeper. So she might not be in jail, but she is doing her time as the wild beast tamed at Jaggers' house. There's one other detail I forgot to mention earlier in that chapter. Jaggers gave Pip a note from Miss Havisham asking Pip to go visit her. So Pip is going to go down tomorrow, and that is in chapter 49. In other words, Miss Havisham has an answer for Pip about whether she is going to fund Herbert's future. All right, stay tuned.